Let's welcome Dr. Ganase, and she's from the Marine Life, and we are treating with the marine environment is under threat, and she is from the IMA. Good morning and welcome, Doc.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for hearing me. I hope you can hear me clearly.
I'm hearing you, yes, and of course, guys, just ensure. All right, so let's get into it. We know bleaching is a major concern. The last time we spoke, there was that concern in varying areas of Tobago, particularly the reefs. Where are we with bleaching in terms of tackling bleaching? And is there any way to really tackle it as to eradicate bleaching at all?
And that's a very good question. I think a lot of people get disheartened when you realize that bleaching is it's a climate change issue. But where how we deal with it is by assisting in recovery, but also managing for chronic issues. So with respect to the 2024 bleaching event, we had monitored in March, and we have seen some recovery of the corals, but we also have seen some die off. So it is still the reefs are still recovering, which means that we need to treat it as if it's in intensive care essentially still. So avoiding things like hitting the reef or touching the reef or polluting the reef and stuff like that. So it's there's no easy solution. It's just managing the reefs so that they can be healthy enough to recover naturally.
We know bleach. All right, I want to stay a little bit with the bleaching. Of course, the runoff from the wetlands with the type of waste that goes into the ocean contributes to the bleaching issue. But just emphasize what we can do to prevent the type of waste, the oil from the garage, and whatever else that seeps into the wetlands and eventually into the ocean. How we can safeguard or protect or prevent that type of waste from getting into the ocean.
Yeah. So that's something that we have to work very closely with land management for. So land-based sources of pollution, so examples like oil, anything that runs off into the roads, will eventually get into the oceans. Imagine a lot of our gray water, so a lot of our drains where we wash our car, where we have runoff from our washing machines, that all ends up into our rivers, which ends up on our reefs. And all of that, all the nutrients, all the chemicals, they create a suboptimum environment for corals to live in. And essentially what we need to do is we need to have better water management systems for the treatment of water that will go before it goes the into our coastal environments. A lot of ways which we try to do that is create natural buffers. So things like coastal development really need to be regulated. So that's why the mangroves with Bonacore Lagoon are very, very important, because they create a natural buffer for a lot of these pollutants, and they're considered to be the livers of our island. So the mangrove ecosystems, they also should be managed and conserved for water quality as well. So that requires upstream. So things like land clearing, avoid land clearing during the rainy season. You know what I mean? So, or create booms where you can collect siltation or sediment. Be mindful of what you're putting down the drains, and also, speak to your local districts or areas about how we can have a more eco-friendly disposal of our grey waters or our oils and whatnot. So if you have a campaign where we're collecting car oil for proper disposal, all of these will help in the coral health.
You mentioned the mangrove, and we take it for granted, and that the role of the mangrove is a filtering type system, so it really cleans. However, we are losing some of the mangrove in certain areas. Are we sensitive enough? Are we aware that I don't want to say replanting, but there has to be some approach to ensuring that mangrove is maintained, given the important role it plays? There's also the seagrass, the marine seagrass, or the right term isn't getting it, that
Yes,
also
you're
acts as a
absolutely.
filter. Let's talk about that. Do we need to plant more marine grass? Do we need to have more mangroves in varying areas? Let's speak to that before we get into the stony coral tissue.
Yes. So in terms of mangroves, what we get is we often get land clearing on the land side. So you have this sort of coastal squeeze where the space where the mangroves grow is less and less. And what we need to do is we need to create a little buffer for the mangroves behind there. So don't build your buildings right up onto the mangroves. Create space where the mangroves can naturally expand or contract as they would naturally do. With respect to replanting, we've seen die-offs in areas in Trinidad, but also in Tobago, for example. We've gotten reports in Pichichu with some dieback, but we also have seen natural regrowth. So it's just sort of monitoring and making sure that regrowth is supported. Um, with respect to seagrasses, we are exploring methods of replanting. So between Trinidad and Tobago, we've seen significant loss of habitat for seagrasses. Most of the areas in the Gulf of Para, we've seen loss of seagrasses, but also in areas like in Northeast Tobago, where this turtle grass used to occur, we don't see it anymore. So we're trying to work out strategies where we can reintroduce it because we know the value of seagrasses in terms of biodiversity, in terms of tourism attraction, because green turtles love to eat seagrasses. But in terms of like also coastal protection, stabilization, it is a very important ecosystem to have, and we benefit from it.
Very good. So we need our seagrass. I said marine grass, but it's seagrass, and I'm sure you're aware. But anyway, all right. So let's go now to the stony coral tissue loss disease and its imminent threat to our coral reef. The last time I went scuba diving, Dave Elliott took me the first time. I really enjoyed that. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful below there, how under there. But however, this stony coral tissue, what is it? It's a disease, of course, and how it affects the coral reef.
Yeah, so this is a major concern for the Institute of Marine Affairs. So stony coral, it's a mouthful, and I'm sorry, but it describes exactly what the disease is. It results in the tissue being lost from the coral, and the coral looks really white. So people might confuse it with bleaching, but if at a closer look you realize it's just the white skeleton of the coral that's underneath. It's a very highly infectious, and it results in mortality very quickly. And so you'd find corals that look like they have white lesions on them, but if you go back a few weeks later, those lesions would have spread. So the disease spreads very rapidly and it results in death very quickly. It was first discovered in 2014 in Florida, and since then it's traveled throughout the Caribbean, and it's actually in Grenada, our closest neighbor, as well in the ABC Islands. We have the Guyana current to thank for blocking Tobago out for now, and this is the reason why things take so long to get to Tobago, but eventually it does get to here. And we're trying to use the lessons learned in other Caribbean islands to sort of slow, or if we get the infection, slow the spread so that we can have better recovery. It infects over 20 species of corals. Most of those corals are very, very common to Tobago. So a lot of the brain corals, especially our giant brain coral and space eye, that is a highly susceptible disease, among other coral species that are very, very common to our reefs. Based on the history, it kills up to 40% of the coral species that it infects. So it's very, very deadly, and it's something that we really need to have preventative measures for.
So, how do you differentiate? Because what I'm seeing here is the same white type, you know, it resembles bleaching. That's what I'm trying to get at. How do you differentiate and how do you approach? Is there any approach to eradicating this stony tissue?
Yeah, so two very good questions. So bleaching, the coral is not dead, right? And it's something that will probably be very hard to differentiate for a regular person. So we encourage people, if they have a photo or if they have a location, to report it to IMA. We have information out on social media and through our Marine Resilience Network to just take a photo, and we can sort of assess for you, hey, this is bleaching or this is a disease. We have a good idea of the status of bleaching at the moment. And so if there's any eruption of a disease outbreak, it will have a different pattern of spread. The second thing is that apart from the preventative measures, which I should go into, are the treatments. So we're working right now very as quickly as possible to try and get antibiotic treatment to be able to treat the corals. So hopefully when it now infects the reef, we can sort of treat as many corals as possible. But if the disease spreads, we would have to start targeting which corals that we want to focus on conserving, because the treatment process is very laborious. Imagine you have to go and eat and treat every single coral colony to prevent the spread. So it is a very laborious job, but that's why we try to focus on preventing the spread so we can slow the rate of spread. Just like how COVID, you have to lower the curve of infection. It's the same thing. Try to do the preventative measures to lower that curve of infection for corals.
Is there a particular area that is more prevalent or present as opposed to other areas?
So it's not present we haven't got any reports in Tobago yet. So we're not hoping, we're keeping an eye out and the air out for any reports. Our big concern is, we have a lot of traffic from Grenada, a lot of sailboats. So we're working with Maritime Service Divisions, but we're asking boats to do preventive measures, so treat their bilge water, exchange their bilge water offshore before they come into our waters so they don't bring the disease. If you're coming to Tobago to dive, we ask you to either just rent local gear or disinfect your dive gear. We use a 1% bleach solution, which is basically like a cup of bleach into a basin of water. It's not much. You soak soak whatever equipment, or you soak the bilge for 10 minutes and then you rinse with fresh water. It's very, very simple. You just need people to be diligent about it. And it's very important that whoever's visiting, be able to sort of understand these rules so that they don't bring the disease to Tobago.
All right. So, so that's a that's a challenge for science, obviously, to eradicate this this disease that is affecting our corals and our coral reef. Is there any possibility that the phenomenon of sargassum seaweed can affect our corals? Is there any study that there's any proof that sargassum seaweed can affect our corals? Given and what does the IMA do with this presence that seems to appear April, May, June, thereabout, every year?
Yeah, so especially this year, the sargassum is especially bad. We have partnerships where where IMA, or rather the Trinidad and Tobago, has been provided with equipment to help assist in the cleanup. I think there is slow, but there is movement to try and get the relative equipment to where it's needed. So East Coast of Trinidad, Tobago, and have it stationed there so that we can have a quick removal of the sargassum as it comes in. With respect to the coral reefs, there are areas. So for example, if you imagine the sargassum is in open water, as it comes into the bay, it gets shallower and shallower, and the reefs are at the bottom of that bay. And so essentially the sargassum can smother the coral reefs. We've seen in past where fish and turtles or marine life that reside on the reefs, they get entangled in the sargassum and they need to be rescued. And so it does act sort of like a net, sort of entrapping marine life. And as that sargassum dies and decays, it changes the water chemistry. So you get this anoxic and this anoxia happening where the oxygen levels drop, and then so organisms suffer from loss of oxygen. So it is pretty bad when it collects for a long time along coastal areas or beach areas, especially where coral reefs are.
All right, so the IMA does have its work cut out, and obviously science is doing its best to fight against these attacks on our marine life. Obviously, we rely heavily on that for our survival, our entertainment, and so many other areas of interest. In closing, what would you want to say to the general public in terms of the presence of bleaching, what we can do. You did mention it earlier. However, this new phenomenon of the stony, looking for it here, it's not coming up. But anyway, the stony coral tissue. And that can cause the serious damage to our marine life. In closing.
Yes, so the institute, we are a research institute. So our role is to sort of find out what's happening, to advise in management, to work with government agencies and community groups. So we really encourage y'all to see, if you see any kind of marine incident or any kind of thing, any coral that looks diseased or suspicious, it doesn't really matter. We encourage you to connect with the IMA. We really value the sort of the citizen science or the citizens' assistance in helping us identify what's being our eyes and ears on the reef, essentially. And so we have flyers. Connect with us on social media. Connect with us through the Marine Resilience Network. Our WhatsApp number is 684-8121. Sorry. So yeah, please, we need as much help as we can.
Mm-hmm. But lastly, let me ask about parrotfish and the importance of it in our coral and the reefs. They provide us, well, they're cleaners, scavengers, but just speak to us. There's a bit of overfishing. There was some concern about one individual who's worried that we are overfishing or getting rid of the parrotfish. We call it shrub, and we like to make broth and thing with that and so on. Just speak to those types of fish that is needed in the coral reef. And what we should do to ensure their survival, because they provide a service to the coral reef. Just enlighten us further.
Yeah, so I mean, I think fisheries management is very, very important to coral reef health. And when you think about it, parrotfish, they're allies to corals. So what they do is they kind of buffer other issues. So they would clean up a lot of the algae that competes with corals. They basically are a very, very important for coral recruitment. So once space is clean of algae, the coral can then settle and grow. And so they are very important for reef health. And I think, we talk a lot about parrotfish, which is very, very important, but it does extend to other fish species on the reefs that have very important roles. And so it's important to manage the fish community on reefs in particular in a special way so that we can actually benefit from them into the future, but also benefit from the reef. So you have to benefit from managing the fish and benefit from how the fish help the reef, essentially.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, indeed. And so we're indeed thankful. And it's a pleasure having you again. And we are very concerned again. But there was just lastly with the seagrass planting, I think there was an initiative that was ongoing. I don't know where we are with that, how far we are with that, and how aggressive we need to get to ensure that this seagrass is replanted.
So we are still investigating the strategies of replanting. We are not doing any large scale planting just yet as part of the project. Our role is to find the science and the best way to do it. So at the moment, we are exploring ways where we can plant from seeds, because seagrasses flower and they create fruit. And so last year we spent a lot of time observing their fruiting and seeding cycle, and we collected seeds. We did a trial replanting of the seeds at Kilwin, but also what we realized is that there's a lot of oceanic processes. So we have to make sure that where we choose as a site will allow for natural growth and further growth of seagrasses. So where we pick is very important, especially as the dynamics of the bay changes after seagrasses have been lost. So it's complicated, and these are the challenges that we are working out through IMA.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much for being with us, and we'll chat again. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.